Welcome back. In a moment, we'll examine Europe's deadly pollution threat. But first, some other stories to keep an eye on. The situation for children in Syria hit rock bottom last year, according to UNICEF. The United Nations Children's Organization says 652 children were killed in the conflict during the last calendar year. That's a 20% jump on the figures from 2015. The French centre-right presidential candidate is embroiled in another scandal. After it emerged, he accepted designer clothing from his supporters. François Fillon, who is already facing allegations his wife was paid for an assistant's job she didn't actually do, is accused of accepting suits worth more than $13,000. And the man known as Carlos the Jackal has gone on trial again in connection with an attack on a Paris shopping centre in 1974. Carlos, whose real name is Ramirez Sanchez, is accused of throwing a grenade into the shopping centre, killing 2 people and injuring more than 30 others. The UK has just a few months to come up with a viable plan to reduce pollution levels or face heavy fines from the EU. It comes after the European Commission issued a final warning for repeatedly breaching air quality levels. The problem of dirty air is more serious than many people realise, whether you're near a busy road or even at home or in your office. Insight Sarah Firth tells us more.
Waging war on pollution, this is a younger generation fight back to the recent revelations that the air we breathe is dirty, dangerous and often illegal.
So we wanted to make it quite anarchic, a little bit dangerous, revolution, sort of that kind of attitude.
Vasilisa's group Clean Air Now started this anti-pollution billboard campaign to try and engage a younger audience.
We'd really like to see more people become aware of the problems of air pollution and in that way start to reach out to the government and then for them to take more action.
Whilst air pollution might bring to mind Beijing or Delhi, France, Germany, Spain, Italy and Britain have all been found to be breaching air pollution limits. This leads to health problems caused by tiny particles and a gas called nitrogen dioxide, both of which are byproducts of the vehicles on our roads, particularly diesel engines. Air pollution data collection is improving, providing clearer estimates of the scale of the problem.
We don't see these particles, but they have health impacts because they penetrate into the lungs. And the smaller the particle, the further down into the lungs they go.
It's not a pretty picture. The air in Britain and some places is so bad that in the first part of this year, one street breached the yearly limit for toxic air in just 5 days. Well, using this monitor, you can see the level of dust particles in the air and it's changing all the time and actually often spiking to get to a level that over a sustained period would be considered unsafe. Now, areas like this have proven so bad for the air quality that the EU has issued the UK with a final warning and told Britain to clean up or face the consequences. Britain's currently preparing a new anti-pollution plan in a bid to avoid heavy EU fines. But in the meantime, for people living in and around pollution hotspots, there's little escape. Now, when it comes to air quality, there's often the assumption that when you step through the door that you're going to be safe. But actually, we've been taking a number of readings and we've found that if you're in your average office space, often near a busy road or in a poorly ventilated indoor space, that indoor air pollution can be just as bad for you. 1 in 9 global deaths are linked to exposure to indoor and outdoor pollution. 92% of the world's population lives in places where air quality levels exceed World Health Organization limits. In the UK, this pollution leads to 40,000 deaths a year. The severity of Britain's breaches of clean air regulations and the seriousness of the consequences has led to the government promising to make tackling the issue a priority, imposing measures like extra charges for diesel cars, low emission zones and electric cars and buses. But changes have been slow and many people in the UK are still exposed to illegal levels of air pollution. We know that these limits are being breached, particularly here in London. you're monitoring this situation. How dangerous as a whole is the situation with the air we breathe right now?
It is the local air quality that comes from traffic and potentially poor traffic management that really impacts upon us as individuals walking around a city. 40,000 people a year die from air quality. We can do something about 40,000 deaths, surely.
From air monitors to eco-gangs, the fight against air pollution has kicked up a gear. But the threat, dubbed the invisible killer, in our streets and in our homes is very real. And the warning from all sides is that despite the increased awareness, the measures to tackle the problem aren't coming fast enough. Sarah Firth reporting for Insight.
Let's learn more about this. I'm joined in the studio by Simon Alcock, who is the Communications and Public Affairs Manager for the environmental law company Client Earth, at the forefront of their Clean Air campaign. This is a very pessimistic prognosis here, Simon. Let's start with the motor cars, and in particular the diesel engine. Is that just got to go? There's no way out. You've just got to stop using them?
I'm afraid so, yes. Ultimately, we have to phase out diesel vehicles from our towns and cities. They produce nitrogen dioxide, which is harmful to human health. Children are some of the worst to suffer because they're at the wrong level, even in a baby, when they're in the womb.
And all the filters and the things these diesel engines have attached to them, they don't work?
No, they don't work. And there's two sort of issues really. And people watching this will be thinking, well, we've been encouraged to buy diesel vehicles. We thought it was better for the environment, better for climate change. When actually it turns out they're really bad for people's health. And secondly, people will remember the VW scandal when they were sort of rigging the tests, the emissions tests. So they're the sort of two big things really that have happened and have sort of got us into this mess in the first place really. And we've now got to stop using diesel vehicles and start driving cleaner cars.
That's easier said than done, of course, and will take time to bring about. Do we have the time?
We don't really. We have to get on with this. And the good news is there are measures we can take now that will help. And with pollution, a small measure can go a long way. We've seen in Oxford Street in London where the buses now are cleaner and pollution has gone down. It's still bad, but it's gone down. And what we really need to see in the UK at least is a national network of clean air zones which would ban the most polluting vehicles from towns and cities. And alongside that, we need incentives to help people switch to cleaner vehicles.
Do you have examples where that's worked?
In some cities like Madrid and in Paris, on days of high pollution, they ban cars and they especially ban diesel vehicles, and it has worked. And
it's tempting to think, the problem's too big. It won't actually have an impact, but you say it does.
It does have an impact, and it really does have a massive impact. And so we know on car-free days, and like a lot of European cities have car-free days on a Sunday, and pollution levels go right down then. So in the Olympics in London, we know that when traffic was monitored and measured, when it was restricted, it had a huge effect on air quality. So we can get there. We should be positive about it. And it doesn't mean that we can't drive vehicles. It just has to be a lot cleaner.
Dramatic moves, though, would be politically suicidal or difficult to get achieved? Or do you think you've just got to make the case?
I think we've got to, this is a public health crisis now. What we know that air pollution does to people's health is a scandal, really, in this day and age. And we know that if the water we were drinking was as dirty as the air that we're now breathing, we'd be doing something about it. And I think it's now time to get on with it.
Do you think then that there is a positive effect by governments throughout the world, and maybe particularly in the European area where this UK is facing a fine, to just keep this subject under wraps then? Because if we actually realise the scale of the poisons we may be ingesting, we would be truly scared by it.
I think what we've seen, you don't need to be a cynic, at least in the UK, to see we're going to be leaving the European Union. Client Earth has fought a court case against the government and has beaten them in the courts. You don't need to be a cynic to think they might wait for us to leave the European Union, possibly the European law won't apply, and then do nothing about it. But I think there is too much pressure now, too much media pressure. People are becoming aware of the issue and how it's damaging their families.
Would you say move out, don't work in a city, don't live in a city?
No, I wouldn't.
Go to the countryside?
I wouldn't say that. I think we've got to do something about pollution in our cities. People live here. It's not realistic to say everyone move out. We've got to actually just tackle the source of the problem, which is diesel vehicles. Let's stop phasing them out and giving people real alternatives.
And masks and things like that? What do you think?
I don't think masks, the science and the medical evidence on that is that masks do much, really, I'm afraid. I think
They get dirty, don't they?
Yeah, they do get dirty.
I mean, anecdotally, you know, friends who cycle or something might wear a mask. If you wear a mask for a week, it's grey and filthy by the time...
I mean, it just shows you how bad the air is. I'm not sure people should look into what the evidence on masks. I'm not sure in London particularly they're great.
They may be giving false hope, are they?
I think so. I think we've got to actually tackle the source of the problem, which is it was the diesel pollution.
And can our buildings do better? It was rather alarming to hear in Sarah's report that even inside under air-conditioned circumstances, you're not necessarily much better off, are you?
No, I mean, I think what your report showed is that wherever you are, you're at a risk of high pollution, especially in cities. But I think the best way of tackling that is the source, really. Obviously, we should take every measure we can, but we've got to do something about the source, which is diesel vehicles.
And in terms of the funding argument, when governments, authorities, mayors of cities, whatever it might be, under huge pressure to either save money or to husband their resources, it's difficult for this to get lost in the argument, isn't it, really, of other priorities?
Well, there is, but what about the cost of the health service? What about the cost of the economy? I think the government estimated that it was 22 billion a year, which is crazy, really. And I think the impact on human health, and especially on children's health, is far too big now for us to just ignore. We've got to do something about it.
Simon Alcott, thank you very much indeed for being with us today. We end with our Insight Bite, a little something that we feel you should know. And today we can bring you the state-of-the-art long-range sub that's set to take its maiden plunge in the Antarctic to study some of the deepest and coldest ocean waters on Earth. The robot is going to map the movement of deep waters that play a critical role in regulating Earth's climate. The yellow submarine is set to leave for Antarctica this week on what will be its first science expedition. It has an unusual name, Boaty McBoatface, after the British public were asked to name the sub's mothership. Boaty was deemed too silly a name for a ship, but good enough for an automatic state-of-the-art submarine. And that's all for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.